Hi, welcome to exercise number 4 of Replicate This After Effects Edition. This one involves RGB circles, so the first thing we're going to do here is import an Illustrator file with circles in it. RGB, it is called, this is on Learning Suite, RGB, circles? There it is, for rgbcircles.ai, and as always we're going to import as composition. We're going to retain those layer sizes. There we go. There's our composition. We double click it. Okay, we have a blue circle, a green circle, and a red circle. In the center of this tiny little composition, we need to start off, since okay, let's take a look at the example movie first of all. This is what we're looking at. Okay, kind of cool. We got some layer modes. We have some different rotational values. We got motion blur, a lot of cool stuff happening here. So that's what we're going to make. Let's stop that. By the way, this is the only Replicate This AE edition exercise that will not be turned in as a QuickTime. This is going to be delivered as an animated GIF. This is going to be a loop. So let's get started. Command A to select all of our layers. Let's hit the letter A on our keyboard to reveal anchor point. And with all of our layers selected, let's drag the Y values of anchor point to the right until they get about somewhere up here. Maybe 110 is a good goal. Okay, anchor point set. I'm going to select all, and now I want to reveal the rotation property. So I'm going to hit R, and I'm going to, well, let's just keyframe. We can either option R or we can hit stopwatch at 0 on our timeline. This is going to be a 3-second long animation, so let's jump to 3 seconds. A lot of you guys ask me in class, how do you jump to 3 seconds? So I like to just eyeball it and get as close as I can, and if I miss it by a frame or two, I can always command left arrow back to where I need to be. So at 3 seconds, we need to, let's see, the blue needs to rotate 1 full rotation. The green is going to rotate 2 full rotations, and the red is going to rotate 3 full rotations. This first field in rotate is full rotations, and this one is fractions of a full rotation, or degrees. Let's set our work area to 3 seconds, N on the keyboard, and let's see what we've got so far. Okay, we've got 3 dots all rotating at different speeds. That's excellent. Okay, what we're going to do now is select all, Command A, select all of our layers. I'm going to go to 0 on my timeline, and I'm going to hit Command D to duplicate all of these layers. Command D, I'm going to reveal the rotation. And what we're going to do here, let's see, this is something you've never done before. Let's start with this duplicated blue layer. By the way, this will be a lot easier to decipher if we change the layer colors. If I select blue 2 and blue and then go to this little color block right here, which is by default lavender, I'm going to change it to blue, and I'm going to change these 2 greens to green. I think you see where I'm going with this. Red is going to be red. Now we can keep them separate within our timeline. Those layer color labels come in handy quite a bit. Okay. As you can see, we have duplicates, but they're doing the exact same thing as the original layers. So what we need to do is, what I think that we should do, rather, is let's make each color's full triangle a blue dot here, there, and there. We'll do that for blue, green, and red, and then we will rotate them. How about that? How does that sound? So what that means is we're going to take this one, and we're going to add 120 degrees. Okay, that looks good. All right, you can see here that it adds that 120 degrees by the end as well, which is nice. And now our 2 blue circles move together. Let's just finish off blue by duplicating blue 2 reveal rotation by hitting the letter R. Yes, hitting R. Just double checking, make sure that's a letter. Sometimes I say things and I don't realize it until I go back and edit the tutorials that I'm just speaking nonsense. Sort of like in class. Okay, so we start off 240 degrees offset. But at the end, did I have them both selected last time? I must have. Okay, we need to have that extra 240 degrees on both keyframes. I'm going to type in 240 here as well. Okay, now we have 3 blue circles that are maintaining, yeah, it's like a rotating triangle now. Okay, let's select all the blues. Let's hide visibility. Let's go down to green 2. Let's go to 0 on our timeline. Option Command left arrow to go to home. And we need to add, I'm just going to see if this works for us. To get our green triangle working, let's add 120 degrees. Now you'll notice I had both keyframes selected there, which didn't do me any good. In fact, it deleted the 2x that I had before, so I didn't love that. Okay, lesson learned. All right, so you can't select both keyframes and do the 120 degree thing for both keyframes at the same time. We have to do each of the keyframes separately. So you can see we have 2 green keyframes rotating. All right, let's complete our triangle. Let's duplicate Command D to get green 3. Let's hit R to get rotate. On our first keyframe, let's type in 240 degrees. There we go, there's our triangle. And then when we jump to our second keyframe, we also need to add 240 degrees. Now what is After Effects going to do if I go in here and I say 120 plus 240? Well, it's going to freak out and it's not going to do what I want it to do. That's interesting. Let's see if we need this to rotate another. Oh, okay, sorry, I did my math wrong. 240 degrees. We didn't need to add, we needed to add 120, not 240. Sorry, I'm tired. Okay, there's our green triangle. We're gonna turn that off. And then let's go down to red. And let's see, let's go to 0 on our timeline. Let's add our 120 degrees so that we get that first rotation. Let's hit Command D to duplicate red 3. Let's hit R to reveal rotation. And again, we're not going to add 240. We're just going to type in 240. There we go. There's our red triangle. Yeah, and see, we've got shenanigans going on here that we're going to have to fix because we need red to stay equidistant. Let's turn on all of our colors and let's just see what kind of a mess we've made here. The blue and the green appear to be rotating correctly. The red is doing something fancy but not at all what we want. So let's just, okay, there's a couple things we could do here. I just want to see what my reds are doing. So I could either come in here to the reds and I can hit the solo button, and that's 3 layers that I have to manipulate, or I could go to these upper 6 layers, the blue and the green layers, for a total of 6, and I could turn those off. What I'm going to do is solo, hit the solo switch so I just see red. I'm seeing red right now. This is the solo switch. Its clever icon is a circle. You can solo more than 1 layer, ironically. Alright, so we're looking at all of our red. Okay, and what's happening here is, yeah, see, we start off at different points, but we all end at the same point, which is 3 rotations. Okay, we need to maintain those degrees. Our first layer, red, has nothing added, so our first layer we can leave alone. We just need that to say 3x plus 0. Red 2 on the second keyframe needs to say 3x plus what? 120, so we maintain our triangle. And then red 3 needs to say 3x plus 240. All right, let's unsolo all of our red layers. Select them all, click the solo. And now let's preview. Okay, now we're talking. All of them are rotating in sync. We have 3 colored triangles. That's exactly what we want. Very good. Okay, now you notice from the example movie that they turn white when they overlap. What is it that's causing them to turn white? Well, there's no way you could know unless you're familiar with layering and compositing in RGB. The reason they're doing that is because their layer mode, all of these layers, layer mode is not normal, but it is add mode. When we set them to add mode and they overlap, they turn white. That's how we get white on a screen, by the way, is by adding all 3 of these colors in different percentages. But when they overlap onto each other all at the same time, they turn completely white. Okay, the only other detail we need at this point is motion blur. And if you are familiar with motion blur, you know that there's a global switch at the top of your timeline. The motion blur switch looks like, motion blur switch looks like this. 3 circles sort of moving through time. Zoom out of my timeline because I zoomed way in because of my lovely Apple mouse. Okay, now a lot of students get confused with the motion blur switch because they think that once they switch that or once they switch another switch somewhere that all of them will work, but that's not the case. It's a 2-part process. First of all, I can't even see my switches because I'm on modes because I clicked this button down here, toggle switches and modes. I'm going to click it again to get back my little switches and see how this right here matches that. Yes, it does. This is a layer-based switch down here, but if I click that, nothing will happen because these are simply labels for these checkboxes. See these dark boxes right here? I'm going to hit Command A to select all my layers, and I'm going to select one of their motion blur switches, and then they all activate. And they now all have motion blur. Let's see how that looks. With the layer modes and the motion blur attached or applied, it looks quite buttery and smooth. And this is exactly what you're going to need to export. But before we get to exporting, let's just double check one more time that you understand what's happening here with the rotations on our circles. Let's go to 0 on our timeline. Okay, so each circle, each triangle made out of circles has the original layer at 0, 0, and the second keyframe is at 1 full rotation plus 0. The second layer, go to 0 on our timeline, starts off at 0 rotations plus 120, so it can rotate down there. The top one starts out with a 240 rotation, so it can be down there and form that third pillar of our triangle. And then if we jump to the second keyframe, you see that all of the blues rotate 1 full rotation. It's just that it maintains that same sort of cascade of degrees. The original doesn't turn any additional, the second one turns 120, and the third one turns 240. That's so it maintains the triangular shape, whilst all of them rotate at full rotation. So that same thing happens with green and red as well. If you look at if you're at 0 on your timeline, look at all of your colors and their rotational properties, and you should see the original have 0, the second has 120, and the third has 240. And then as you go to the second keyframe, you note that they all maintain that same degrees, but they all just add 2 full rotations, 1 full rotation, or 3 full rotations if we're talking about red. Okay, let's talk about exporting. Let's go to Composition, Add to Render Queue. Hang on a second. One thing we forgot to go over is making a proper loop. Probably can't tell on this tutorial, mostly because it's not playing at real time, and I don't know why. My computer can't handle it. Maybe because it's because I'm screen capturing right now. But if you remember from the looping animation exercise, this isn't actually a real loop. This animation plays the same frame twice. Do you remember about the go 1 frame to the left and trim it game that we did? Okay, this frame and this frame, oh, you know what? With motion blur, they're not actually identical. But what we're going to do, I wonder if that masks. Let's just see, if we do it the proper way, how this goes. So we actually want to trim this 1 frame shorter because, well, with the exception of motion blur, without motion blur on. There, let's just disable it globally for a second. All right, yeah. So what I'm trying to show you is that these two frames are identical, so we need to trim one frame off. Turn motion blur back on. Let's zoom in to where our current time indicator is. I'm going to go one frame to the left, move our current time indicator one frame to the left by going Command left directional arrow key, and then I'm going to hit N on my keyboard to set the work area just one frame shorter so we get an actual perfect loop. Okay, now let's go back to the render queue, and from the animated patterns and loops assignment, you know that only thing we need to do in here pretty much is to tell it where to save and what to call it. I'm going to save it to my desktop, and then I'm going to click render. And this should be really quick. And there's the happy render sound. Okay, I'm going to save, and then I'm going to go to my desktop. I'm going to find RGB circles 2.move, and I'm going to open it in Photoshop. Yes, I'm opening a QuickTime movie in Photoshop. We've done it before. Now sometimes Photoshop takes a while opening, so let's just see. Hey look, the loading animation's similar to what we're doing, only it's a hexagon instead of a triangle. Okay, it's only a 3-second movie, Photoshop. There we go. You don't actually need this video timeline, but just center, get that on screen. Okay, now all we really need to do from Photoshop is export an animated GIF. So I'm going to go to the old legacy save for web, file, export, save for web, and it's going to bring up this dialog. And instead of PNG, I want, you know what, I'm not going to use a preset, I'm just going to change, and this next lower drop down, I'm going to select GIF. Wow, my computer is really blowing the fans. Hopefully you can still hear me. It's important that you have all of your colors here. Diffusion is on. Now this should all be on by default, so we won't go over too much of this, but just make sure when you select a GIF, don't do the top preset, just do the format, and then all of this should fall in line. Adaptive, diffusion, 256 colors. That's the max amount of colors you can have in a GIF, by the way. And then the most important thing you probably want to do in here is set the looping options to go forever. Go ahead and save it to my desktop. Click save, and we're done. I'm going to close out Photoshop. I don't need to save this movie anymore. I'm going to quit, and let's go to the desktop. Let's just go here then to see what that looks like. Now you guys can drag this into a browser if you'd like, or you can just show me in the Finder, but I want you to make an animated, looping animated GIF of these 4 RGB circles. And that's it. See you on the next tutorial.